lecture in the series, um, research in the humanities in the 20th century. And I have the very distinct honor of, welcoming you all today, and in particular, welcoming Professor Leslie to give this talk. And I feel really honored to, make a few remarks by way of introducing Professor Leslie. In fact, I feel relaxed, unlike when I introduce other people, because Professor Leslie is a very friendly scholar. And without any doubts, I can say that she's an outstanding, highly sophisticated researcher and very suitable for the 21st century. So I think she would be the best, speaker in the series. So therefore, just to say a few facts about her, she is a professor of political aesthetics at Birkbeck, University of London. She is also the co-author, co-director of the Birkbeck Institute of the Humanities, and she directs it along with Professor Jacqueline Rose. And Professor Sisaki is the international director of this institute. So you can imagine what kind of people that she's working with. And her interest, I was just reading about her interests in research. She is interested in Marxism, Frankfurt School, politics of science, Walter Benjamin, modernism, color, anarchism, Somerstown, radical aesthetics, fascism and Nazism, critical theory, animation. And as I said, she's an outstanding researcher in all these fields. I was reading also that she has around 2,178 citations already from her books and journals. Just for your information, some of the books from her, one is Walter Benjamin, Overpowering Conformism in 2000, Hollywood Flatlands, Animation, Critical Theory, and the Avant-Garde in 2002, Synthetic Worlds, Nature, Art, and the Chemical Industry in 2005, Walter Benjamin in 2007, Derelicts, Thought Worms from the Wreckage in 2014, Liquid Crystals, The Science and Art of a Liquid Form in 2016. She's into all kinds of sophisticated fields of research into alien sentience and the extension of intelligence, on liquid crystal animation and the excessive capacities of the matter, on the ambience of fogs and forms, on optical delight in the epoch of the computational, and on particularity in the presence of the particulars. In fact, recently, she also works on cloud. I just read one sentence for you. Now we live alongside and even inside a huge cloud metaphor. That is the cloud. I think she's referring to the computer cloud computing. Are we witnessing the creation of a synthetic heaven into which all production has been relocated and the digital clouds make all the moves? And she's into all these areas of research. And I'm also very proud to say that when I was at summer school recently, she was my teacher, and I listened to her wonderful lecture on the cloud. So, with tremendous honor, tremendous gratitude, let me welcome Professor to give this talk on Heading the Clouds today. So I welcome all of you, including our conveners, Biju and Priya, and all the distinguished participants for the third lecture. Thank you all, and over to you, Professor Leslie.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Thomas, for inviting me. It's my first time giving a talk to people situated in India, so it's very exciting. And my talk is an effort to use a cross-disciplinary mode of humanities research to explore and explain aspects of our present. And it's a very speculative talk. And I'm going to share my screen and hope that this works for you. Okay, so hopefully you can there see my title, and then next one. Oops. Yeah, a motto to start this from Theodor Adorno. I'm adapting this because my talk is very exaggerated in part, and it follows this line from Adorno that in psychoanalysis nothing is true but its exaggerations. I'm not doing psychoanalysis today, but in some sense I am psychoanalyzing our contemporary situation. And so for me and for this talk, nothing is true but the exaggerations. So I want to start with a website which flickers across social media consciousness now and again. This website is called This Person Does Not Exist. And if you visit that URL, you find simply photographs of faces. When the person depicted looks ordinary, has wrinkles or blemishes or tangles of hair, maybe some faint reflection in their glasses or light bouncing off noses. Every time you refresh the web page, a new face appears. There's a limitless supply of people of different ages, ethnicities. Many of them seem very happy and confident. They're often smiling, and the background is usually blurred. These people exist in front of nowhere specified, just a green haze, a blueness. Occasionally, little signs indicate that all is not quite as it should be. So an ordinary middle-aged woman's wearing just one large earring. Some younger, hi, there's a ghost in the machine. Stop, stop. Like I've been taken over by the generative network. So sometimes you'll see the woman has mismatched earrings or a fragment of gold in the middle of one earlobe. Sometimes the pink of lips smudges onto the teeth. Sometimes the ghosted image of another face appears in the corner, or there's a distorted semi-face of another person looming on one edge of the image. Truly, a ghost has taken over my machine. It's very weird. The faces are usually looking at us, gazing through the screen to lock eyes with the viewer. But they don't see because photographed people do not see. More than that, their eyes really have never had sight. These people do not exist. They are AI-generated faces. So these are the faces of new clouds, or rather crowds, or in other words, nobodies, who look like somebody enough to pass the test of the GAN, the Generative Adversarial Network. This network must decide which fake persona meets enough superficial criteria to plausibly possess a real-world body and credible life. But in fact, it's just some pixels thrown together out of a melange of every face that does exist on the web and could exist in different combinations. This infinite assembly then is a crowd in the cloud. But it's also not there. These faces only flash into being within that context for a moment, never to be seen again. They are the denizens of a vague crowd, and they would be impossible to mobilize for anything, even though mobilization has long been the purpose of crowds, that sense in which the crowd is to be whipped up for politics, or for warfare, or for consumption, or for fun. Some of these fake figures are generated just in order to have a Facebook account that might then be used for some sort of phishing. Some of these faces might touch the heart of another in a melancholic ripple reminiscent of Charles Baudelaire's spasm when he was amidst the crowds, written in poetic form in À une passante from 1857. The Parisian poet writes of seeing in a lightning flash on the busy boulevards of Paris a fleeting beauty, a woman whose glance made him reborn, a woman who will never be seen again. A lightning flash, then darkness, fleeting chance whose look was my rebirth, a single glance. Through endless time shall I not meet with you? Love at last sight, a hopeless love. Let's linger a sweetish sense of loss of what has never been and never will be. Might somebody give over their heart to these AI confections? I don't know what's happening to my machine. Very, very strange. So this phrase, love at last sight, that Walter Benjamin takes over from Charles Baudelaire, imagining, that this sort of sense, you see a woman passing on the boulevard, and that becomes the epitome of what you would love to fall in love with, but they've already been moved on by the sweep of the crowd. So could somebody give their heart over to the AI confections in this person does not exist? And if you did so, would you really be giving something of yourself to the cloud where these faces are born and die constantly? A cloud which is itself just a fantasy, just as the loved one is a fantasy, an ideal version of itself. Now, it's often said, but do we really know it? The name cloud encourages us to imagine the cloud of cloud computing to be a nowhere place, a heavenly place. But if it's nowhere, it is also a somewhere that is or might be everywhere. The cloud that we think of now with the capital C is a vaguely grasped storage space. We think of it in amongst the actual clouds, but in actuality, it is a materially robust and energy-hungry infrastructure, an arrangement of hubs and servers on and under the ground. We notice clouds when they are distinct against the blue sky and when the sun shines through them and they shimmer or their outlines are illuminated. The cloud computing, despite its cumulus cloud icon, is more like grey, overcast skies, where the cloud coverage is pervasive and yet unseen because it is so total. We're all connected under this one sky, just as Constable, back in the day, painting his cloud studies on Hampstead Heath, said, "We are all connected under one sky." Never more so than now, perhaps. As the COVID-19 pandemic affected life on the planet, it was cloud infrastructure with its switches, routers, firewalls, load balancers, storage arrays, backup devices, and servers that swelled, becoming the means by which work from home was made possible, as well as home education, online shopping, social meetups via Zoom, and everything else. On my sky now, through my window, and not just through my screen, there's a tangible vision of this commitment to a concrete immateriality. This is the massive new building for Google UK, which is being built in King's Cross, designed for 7,000 employees, should they be tempted back into the city. What you see here is just one of several lift shafts for it. It's a real sky stealer from my low point perspective. Even if it is proclaimed widely as low rise, it has only 11 stories. As you see, only the lift shafts have been built so far at this point, but those alone are enough to blot out the sun from certain angles. This building is located here to be close to Alphabet's deep mind, where so much AI work goes on, which is another 11 stories, and Facebook's 3 buildings of up to 12 stories. Here, where there were once warehouses and markets, a dense cloud gathering comes. The vagueness of the cloud and its institutions is countermanded by the concretion of its infrastructure. Its infrastructure is expanding. While we were cooped up seeing the world through screens, the world took on new shapes, threw up new buildings, cleared new ground. A recent report in the press notes that structural steel group Severfield has seen its revenues rise in the 6 months to 30th September 2020, with a UK and Europe order book of 28.7 million. I don't know why this is just taking on a life of its own. I speak about animation too much. What could it be? Maybe I'm pressing something without knowing why. Very odd. Okay. I'll let it just roll round because the images move in and out of relevance anyway. So this firm, which has had a wonderful 2020, all during the pandemic, saw its profits surging, had a strong order book, its revenue was up vastly. One of the projects it's working on is Google's new headquarters at King's Cross. It's been building the cloud that will take the place of the clouds on our horizon. And there'll be clouds above it, just as there always are on Google's own images of the outsides of its data centers. I've thought a lot about clouds over the past few years. Clouds and fog and mist and froth and foam and all those interstitial things. I was drawn into thinking about so many different types of cloud, some of which are passing before you. Emotional clouds, cloud 9, heavenly clouds that present signs, portents, grey clouds and silver linings, impossible clouds, painterly clouds. Clouds such as those in Cloud Cuckoo Land, or the Lego version of the same. Clouds of nebulae in cosmic space and in our eyes. Dust clouds after explosions. Thought clouds. Daydreaming clouds. Clouds at the heart of meaning and theory. The mushroom cloud of the atomic bomb. Cholera clouds and magic mists. Buildings made of cloud. I was drawn to think about why the cloud was so extensive, so fungible, so mutable or modificatory, to take Luke Howard's terminology. Luke Howard, who named our clouds and spoke about them precisely as self-modifying entities. They change themselves all the time. And I wondered about the ways in which that modificatoriness translated away from the cloud into all the mutable forms of cloud that exist today, including the cloud of cloud computing. The word cloud, so it is said, comes from the word clod, a mass of rock or ball of hardened earth. Those classic clouds, the cumulus clouds, looked more or less like clumps of petrified matter. The airy-fairy shape-shifting cloud is named after its opposite, whom it appears to resemble. Not clouds as cushy supports for lofty thinkers, but rather the cloud's true inhabitant might be the etymologically similarly derived plod, or plot, or plut, the dullard who stumbles around in an unthinking fug. It's the issue that when it comes to thinking about what is up there to the cloud regions, everything's likely to glide into reverse. The philosopher Ernst Bloch gives a beautiful image of this in relation to utopian thinking. In his study of the utopian function of art and literature, he speaks of clouds as a fairy tale quality of nature. To children, they appear like distant mountains, entities in a towering and wonderful foreign land above our heads, or a Switzerland in the sky. But Bloch notes that the cloud is not just a castle or an ice mountain to the fairy tale gaze. It's also an island in the sea of the sky, or it's a ship, and the blue skies on which the cloud sails resemble the ocean. So fluffy clouds become solid mountains in thought, or the airy blue sky becomes imagination's watery seas, air becomes water, becomes mountain, gas becomes liquid, becomes solid. If the heavens are like a mirror for Bloch, reflecting Earth's inversion, then so too down below in the world of body and action, we might allow new futures to emerge. This is how Bloch takes it. If up there above is the world of mind, thought, and imagination and alternative histories, including better ones, if the clouds are the fuzzy matter of utopian speculation for Bloch, the moving screens onto which can be projected a revolutionary not yet, then they function as this kind of canvas or tableau in which our dreams can be unfurled and then in some way, through some stimulus of imagination, brought down to earth to concretize the wishes. That is Bloch's revolutionary eschatology. The clouds are to be brought down to earth. Our new improved selves and lives and political arrangements will roll in from the clouds. It's more common nowadays to encounter the more managerial, cliched version of this, as it is called, blue sky thinking. I'm trying to express how the cloud often stands in for something that it is not, or we could say the cloud is not what it seems to be because it's always moving to become something else, or it names something that is other to itself. Who would think, anyway, that these were objects without surfaces, were strangely insubstantial, just a bit of gas? How could clod-likeness, earthy solidity, cake icing, furls, be in actuality just the opposite, a gas and air and not muchness? These primary masses without qualities, as Michel Serres terms it, may be insubstantial, but they bear so forcefully upon us mentally, as I've suggested, through their annexation to imagination, but physically too, as anyone who has suffered turbulence caused by clouds' uneven updrafting of warm air will know. We experience that only, I suppose, in aeroplanes. But we seem to fall back all the time on the soft cloud. It cushions us in some way. It's there to make us happy. It softens the blows of life, supports us, and gives way to us. Plenty of commercial items attest to that. Then we could think of the spectacular work of the art collective Friends with You, whose clouds, placed everywhere and anywhere in the global art market spectacle, reimport under strictly commercial terms a utopian horizon. These clouds never stop doling out happiness. The version of a cloud with inflated cumulus curves and basic facial features and appears in much of the collectives, American collectives' artworks. The cloud, for Friends with You, the name of the collective, represents all that is optimistic and spiritual. They describe the cloud on their website um, under the name Little Cloud as a symbol of hope and the unification between humans and the natural world, a key symbol of Friends with You's mission. Little Cloud transcends the viewer to a peaceful, joyous, and more positive state. Little Cloud in itself is a positive call to action, to spread and share happiness and connectivity. Um, they created what they call a worldwide symbol that embodies an emotional and personable storyline, manifesting itself into animations, large scale outdoor sculptures, limited edition bronze sculptures, limited edition prints, hanging inflatable sculptures, and a 30-foot blimp in the Macy's Thanksgiving Day parade and beyond. Let's have a small intermission. Perhaps I was drawn to this softness, even if the kitsch of its commercialized versions repelled me, including, I think, in Friends with You's work. Walter Benjamin wrote in a little essay called Experience and Poverty from 1933 of Mickey Mouse as just such a universal or worldwide symbol. He called it the earth encircling figure of the collective dream, who, as an antidote to the creeping rule by technology in the 1920s and 1930s, could conjure miracles from his own body and out of the most ordinary pieces around him, as well as from trees, clouds, and the sea. Mickey Mouse came to save the world from the ahuman technical catastrophe of war. On the battlefields of the Great War, chemical gases fuzzed up the European landscape, expelling through toxic heavy air the possibility of contemplation at peace, or aura, to use Benjamin's famous notion. This gas cloud negates vision, contemplative or otherwise. In the artwork essay, Benjamin's most famous essay, he announces that the gas warfare of the First World War, together with technological reproduction, abolishes aura anew, for it destroys the landscape as a place of contemplation. And yet, in altering the rules of war and hazing up the battlefield, this cloud, this new fake or manufactured aura comes along technologically, presenting itself in some ways as a new fate, a natural order of the modern world, the order of warfare. Elsewhere in the essay on experience and poverty from 1933, where Mickey Mouse is located as the antidote to all of this hopeful utopian moment, Benjamin observes this of his own fin de siècle generation. They were a generation that had gone to school on a horse-drawn streetcar, and now stood under the open sky in a countryside in which nothing remained unchanged but the clouds. And beneath these clouds, in a field of force, of destructive torrents and explosions, was the tiny, fragile human body. That body is no less fragile now. But the force fields and the torrents have garnered different resonances, as indeed have the clouds, which can no longer be claimed as unchanged. If you look up the word cloud on an internet search engine now, the references that dominate are to the cloud, the computer infrastructure, the storage space for bits of data, which manifests as pixels. The cloud is not imagined in the internet zones that are themselves of cloud, is not imagined as fluffy, ball-like structures, but rather as something more indistinct, universal, as universal in its coverage as Constable's cloud-filled skies. But now the times, the days, the moments of our benighted existence come crashing in. What clouds do we pass through now? The aerosols of virus, the invisible clouds that threaten to contaminate us. These invisible clouds crowd the atmosphere and compel us to remain inside, engaging instead with their virtual namesake of the cloud. There's something about the current moment, coincidentally or of necessity, which means that aerosols and gels and foams and froths, interstitial cloudy types of matter, are focusing scientific attention. These are all within a class of materials known as soft matter, which exhibit complex behaviors such as self-organization, self-assembly. Their physics is distinctive and capricious. They exist often at a mesoscopic or intermediate scale between the atomic and the whole. They're always soft. Many tiny fluctuations act on their systems to decide the system's fate, a procedure known as symmetry breaking, leading from a symmetrical yet disorderly state into something more definite and patterned. Respiratory coronaviruses, such as SARS-CoV-2, themselves a soft matter form, are transmitted by another soft matter object, by aerosols, in which the liquid phase is rich in mucin and other biopolymers. Our pandemic, then, is just the latest type of cloud, partakes of what a cloud is and does. As a recent article on soft matter science and the COVID-19 pandemic puts it, importantly, it's not so much the single body motion of isolated droplets, but the collective motion of a propelled turbulent cloud of droplets that controls subsequent travel through air and deposition on surfaces. In my thinking, it can happen that everything becomes a cloud, or it's easier to ask what is not a cloud, if we choose to see it that way. That might be a consequence of my thinking. Perhaps to offset it, I could turn to a study of atmosphere to propose how the cloud and what might be claimed of it as a body of particles ever changing and moving and disintegrating and reformulating helps provide some sort of method for thinking, provides a method for me anyway, even if I do still have to build something more robust, something more defined to stop everything becoming cloud. We could look at how recent atmospheric studies over the eastern North Atlantic have observed that tiny aerosol particles that seed the forming of clouds can appear from almost nothing when above the oceans, from a few atoms of gas clustered in the boundary layer between the sea and the air. That's an atmosphere that exists up to a kilometer above the surface of the Earth. Feeding particles for clouds are formed. Sunlight reacts with molecules of trace gases, and water condenses on these particles as cloud droplets. And this tininess, this minuscularity or particle particularity, scales up to affect and makes whole atmospheres. Such new knowledge about cloud formation through these instant particles is helpful to those who wish to build simulations of the climate of Earth from the past into the future, models that draw on the other cloud's power of rapid calculation and play with the particularities of different aerosol um, uh, uh, properties of size and number and spatial distribution to calculate how future clouds, clouds never seen before, this cloud does not exist perhaps, those clouds, how they will reflect and absorb sunlight and affect the future of the Earth in the future. Clouds have led me and you to a hinge point. Since 2019, we've been able to toggle an animated layer of clouds, the last 24 hours of cloud data, on and off at any point on the globe through Google Earth. The cloud facilitates clouds, allows past clouds to become an experience, composited, not photographed, second-order pixel clouds at an animation rate of 1 frame per second, corresponding to 1 hour of cloud motion time per second, with smooth blending or cross-fading between successive frames of the video. Are they clouds for gazing at? Or clouds there just because they can be, so they may be? Are they particular clouds? Or just pixel ones? Are they a gesture towards the clouds that promised a universal experience and hinted at democratic existence for Constable? We are all under the same sky. And what about how they come to be and how they exist in their specific rendition of the world? What about that would help us understand them better? What would reveal those clouds to us now? Let's return, as we have been by this globe, to Google in a particular place, not this US headquarter, but the one near me, out of the window, present but inaccessible, becoming present. This ghostly rendition is just a simulation of how the new building will look from the inside. For all its concretion, a lot of nebulousness still exists around it. For those left outside, there's only a fuzzy sense of what happens or will happen inside. Someone somewhere in that cluster of concrete will be working on facial recognition technologies. That suits the location where the new building is based in King's Cross, a privatized area of London, the King's Cross estate, which is home to a hub of digital and platform capitalist enterprises, Facebook, YouTube, all of them, in a vast development designed for leisure, shopping, learning, and working. As said, it's entirely private there, governed by regulations that the estate owner refuses to reveal. It's full of CCTV. In fact, there was a controversy in August 2019 when it became apparent that surveillance cameras with facial biometric capabilities had been deployed on the estate for more than a year and a half, and they were able to track the 150,000 passers-by each day, map their movements, their purchases, and behaviors. That went against European laws on general data protection regulation, and the estate had to switch the cameras or their capacity for facial recognition and database checking off. They don't currently use facial recognition technologies there, but the team is still investigating a new system, and in a Brexit post-European regulatory framework, they may yet come back. They say the work is on hold. They're holding on. It's holding on, ready to be reanimated in a new world, such as the one gathering around us. What's to come at us is as imprecise as a cloud. Clouds come down to Earth in the form of fog. Fog is a visible aerosol, a dense concentration of water or molecules suspended in air. We pass through it. The fog of fog computing is not visible as we pass through it, but it is still an atmosphere busy with rapid data processing on secure local devices. There's also edge computing, another mode that's currently in development now, where the processing occurs sort of in a sense at the edge of our vision in devices that are even closer to us through our own devices, but imperceptibly to us. And edge computing is being integrated with AI to make autonomous vehicles safer, to monitor medical conditions and drug delivery. edges distribute across our surfaces, communicating to someone somewhere, saying whether workers have cleaned recently, or uh, um, also, they're used within these instant database facial recognition systems. So edge computing is deployed often in surveillance cameras because it's so efficient, so fast. It can trawl very quickly through lots of data to identify a face, a wanted person, the habits of consumers, someone with or without the required permits. It can even clock perceived emotions. Microsoft's Azure service specifies the detection of a range of facial expressions such as happiness, contempt, neutrality, and fear. And upon seeing what it is asked to find, the system makes almost instant decisions. So crowds are no longer crowds, but pixel spots of identifiability. Our motives, what we are, why we do, what we feel, becomes a property of the edge or the fog or the cloud. The people comfits, these confections in this person does not exist, do not know who they are or that they are. They cannot consent to be seen or request to be not seen, though nor can we, really. Our faces are made and remade in the cloud and stored in the cloud, sent up to the cloud, drawn down from the cloud. In this vague thing, this thing built for our imagination and by it. Innocuous in its name, like the cookie before it, that was also a trace of power, silently stored on our computers, and for whom we became trails of crumbs of data or little Hansels and Gretels, unconsciously marking our wanderings. We might wish to float as free as the cloud, and those of us who long for such untetheredness would do well to upskill, to find a way to short circuit the conversations of devices by braiding the AI generated faces with the facial recognition systems that wish to possess our traces, maybe faces in the cloud, um, and make for ideal couples with those facial recognition systems that are constantly seeking new faces to identify, to take up. So the question comes up of who and what and where are we amidst the froth of modern technology and the brew of chemicals and all the agitated air of data streams, the agitated air of polluting particulates. What are we as solid bodies on the ground, ourselves drawn from the mud in some way, and now very much annexed to the liquid crystal device, still have to do round here? Our bodies have long been comprehended by physiology, connecting us to the science of the normal functions of living things, or the question of how bodies work. Physiology focuses on biochemistry, on sugars and energies, and the laws of thermodynamics. But today, that field of physiology is enmeshed with processes that are digital, computational, and data driven. They're also annexed to a kind of science of emotion that re-evokes this one from the 19th century. Um, this is Darwin using photographs that had been obtained via quite a complex network of machinery that's then all airbrushed out. Darwin looking into the science of emotions. And we are so enmeshed now in logging and clocking and generating our own emotions via the machine. We now, as bodies, exist in a sense within as a point through which a stutter or a current of data passes, like every other node in that network, in that Internet of Things, which as a whole forms an international or galactic network of connected parts, amongst which a body is just another thing, a punctuation point in a common language. What's on the outside is far less interesting than what's on the inside. an interior of ghostly shadows on screens or graphs and charts and number. If we wish to know the functions of bodies today, we don't explore faces or lay hands on the shell of the skin. We apprehend through media and through their contiguity to quantification. In retrospect, the cyborg, as conceived by Donna Haraway, seems all too intelligible compared to the immensities that confront us now, at least in the way that cyborg entered imaginations and turned up in 1,000 Hollywood movies, some sort of prothesis, some contact lenses, a pacemaker, some sort of assignation with technology. That engagement swelled. That rendezvous between technology and the body became a colonization, and there's more to come. Bodies built out of web detritus, with AI drawing down on neural networks that outbid the eye-peppered psychedelia of deep dream. Physiology is a matter for the non-matter of the screen. Our devices, our liquid crystal devices, and the gestures that we direct at them, the taps, the swipes, the pinches, and the rest, bind us to each other, as if these mediators that exist beneath and through the touch screen were just another communicant, and not an ever watching, ever seeing, ever hearing, ever learning, ever sensing intelligence for those intent on knowing us better, which usually means more profitably or more securely than we know each other and ourselves. We're watching liquid crystals moving under polarized light here. These things are a form, a force. They're conceived as a life form by some, whose capacities are mobilized in order to sense our environment intelligently, to take a turbid swirl of inputs and produce data, output something for someone to read. This color-changing anima, called liquid crystal, was perceived itself first through the microscope and through polarizing lenses in the late 19th century, but back then it was barely understood. Its name had not yet settled. Flowing crystals, crystalline fluid, mesomorphs, crystal worms were all early names given to it. Some saw these animate forms, like crystals before them, as alive, or at least akin to life forms. Their discoverer, Otto Lehmann, emphasized lifelikeness in his book titles Liquid Crystals and the Theories of Life, Apparently Living Crystals, Liquid Crystals and Their Apparent Life. He made an animation in which they moved. But the liquid crystal does not live exactly as humans live, even if it moves using energy. And even if it blunders when it makes its defective patterns, we might say to err is to be human, but it is somewhat of a stretch. Liquid crystal has a semblance of liveliness, of the minimal characteristics required for life, and it is that is harnessed in contemporary science and technology. Sealed into screens as tiny operators, the liquid crystal models life in a number of ways. It facilitates the liveliness that appears on screens, those miniaturized lives, the fictional ones that stream their dramas across smaller and larger screens, and the real-time, in real life ones of social media, with their updating, their feeling, their expressing. Each push notification a breath of that vast, lively network that can, in a crisis, turn into a lifeline. I'm trying to give you an image of this planet, this universe, crisscrossed by a tangle of wires that constitute the internet, dotted by servers and cloud storage facilities, all of which rests on these tiny little chemical compounds called liquid crystals. This infrastructure shoots through 1 trillion devices that are more or less close at hand. These devices come to be seen as indispensable for life. A podcast from the Smithsonian notes the following: oil is the blood, steel is the body, but rare earth elements are the vitamins of a modern society. these rare earth elements that suffuse high-tech gadgetry, the stuff that makes our digital society flow and glow, the very stuff of life essential to our metabolism, but needing to be continually deployed, augmented, and optimized, bought and supplemented. And if you do not take your vitamins, you will have reduced capacity, self-inflicted ailments, a general inability to function in modern society. That is a description of how we must be in the liquid crystal world, watching liquid crystal agitations on screens. The screen is liquid crystal and it contracts all history and all social interaction, all data and all fantasy to swim across it, under it, gleaming on it. And once it's passed through and been expressed in the captured liquid crystal's lights, it too becomes a resource, something extractable and valorizable. Our emotional worlds are fickle, nudged by inputs, converted into outputs. Our social world too is ever changing, iridescent. Nothing may be allowed to stay still. Our immensity is as great as any or greater. For capital will do anything to dissolve all that is solid, to act against inelasticity, to steal the heat off labor and to spill it into commodities, those icy abstractions of the goods we use and use up. Karl Marx noted early on that his present society is no solid crystal, but an organism capable of change. And so capital generates the heat of economy, which translates into the energy of data, the cascades of numbers, frenetic financial activity. Liquid crystal might be an analog of capitalism in motion, tending towards its own dissolution and recomposition, just functioning as does a cloud. These images that we went past are some paintings by Agnieszka Kurant, her conversion paintings, which take social energies, the heat and froth of sentiment as expressed through social media feeds, and converts it into another energy form of heat, in order to converse and convert through liquid crystal paint. So the kind of emotional temperature of the internet at any one moment is modeled in the patterns that appear on these metallic painterly forms. It's a kind of pathetic fallacy that's not a fallacy. The painting lives through our lives, is as moody as us, but it lives its life too, animated, breathing in color, proposing patterns. Emotional energy is harnessed and converted into something that can be mined for meaning here. But of course, that happens all the time through our constant donation of meaning through emojis, emoticons, status updates, and so on. Here, the temperature of the times is taken. It could be annexed to markets or become a market for itself. How much anger is there on the index today? Can that anger be quelled by extra deployment in the streets of legal officers? Could it be monetized in an advertising push on calming devices, lavender-filled pillows delivered instantly by drone, or domestic punch bags, or the swift declaration of a pressure-releasing war? Or we might say, social media seems sunny and frothy today. Let's push those fluffy cloud plushes and increase the supply of ornamental sequined rainbow unicorns, or have a drive on gifting. Markets and emotions are volatile. Behavioral scientists have come to the fore of late with their nudge theories, their embeddedness in strategic policy of governance. Perhaps their offices are not oak paneled, but liquid crystal paint lined. The greens, the blues, the oranges, the yellows, emitting readings of the emotional temper of the nation or the universe minute by minute. We do not just converse with liquid crystals in our screens. Of course, liquid crystals are inside of us, in our hair cells, in the inner ear, inside us transporting fats, in the cilia in our sinuses and lung tissue, in the membranes of cells, in DNA and RNA, and in our brain. They're viruses. We eat and drink them in bread and milk. They're in the slimy mess of our soap dish and in snail trails. Liquid crystals model, like in animation models, the larger world of which they are a small and massively distributed part. Newly, they've been prodded into new dimensions, been made three-dimensional in order to, through the previously unseen topological structures that they can bring into being, um, they're sort of prodded in order to monitor and map the ways in which crowds might function, how crowds might move through the observation of systemic dynamics. It allows scientists also to both model, understand, and use as an analog the movements within bacterial colonies or configurations and procedures inside the human body, such as flow within cytoplasm, the fluid inside cells. Liquid crystal behaviors, the behaviors in us of liquid crystals, all that can be monitored and known more precisely. The gentle shimmers of a paint turned life form, an animate sub-object compelled into expression by an externality, might that allow us to escape a grid of prediction and get something more collective and aggregated, some way of harnessing that mapping, that blooming and blossoming portrait of an emotional life for us? Is that a social power that we could use in some way? Or is it all just presenting itself in order for others to lean it, to turn it into an antisocial, non-social, or asocial power? We've moved maybe in quite wandering and meandering ways, as we might expect from the cloud, whose moves are in some way caught within this dialectic of prediction, in that we map and we model the cloud and we want to know the clouds of the future and how they will produce the atmospheres of the present. So we try to capture them within the grid, but at the same time, we're trying to capture the uncapturable. And there are always surprises. And I've moved from that to thinking about the mode in which we model them through liquid crystals and how that allows us to see the world, to visualize the world in its modeled forms, in its pixelated versions. But again, it's subjected to the grid, to a tangle, to what seems like a tangle of inputs and connections to us from the point on the outside, which is in reality a point on the inside because we're within it. But is it something that is not for us, or is there a way in which we can harness and recapture, with some expansive use, all of this extraordinary power that's contained in those concrete boxes, such as the one that's being built near me outside my window by Google? I'll stop there. It's probably way too meandering, and I hope you have some questions that force me to make more sense of it inside of Google data centers. Okay, let me stop sharing and come back to you all. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Professor Leslie. And As she has announced, we have some time for a few questions or some comments or queries, responses. And it's also an announcement that there will be a feedback link in the end. So please fill up that link.
He's still muted.
Oh, sorry. Am I muted now? Or can you hear me? Biju?
Sorry, I can't hear you, Thomas.
Yeah, Biju, can you hear me? What's happening?
Oh, it was me. I have my sound turned down.
Okay.
Sorry about that.
Biju, are you there?
Yes, yes, of course, I'm
Yeah,
here.
okay. Okay, so I think I was clear enough so that we have a few minutes, maybe 30 minutes for some comments, questions, responses, and so on. So can you, I think I will read a couple of
Yeah, sure.
Comments that appear in the chat box. Can you hear me, Professor?
Yes.
Okay. So let me read this. Considering the contemporary milieu of virtuality and simulations, how far do you think after theory literature should or can reflect or refract reality? Has not reality to become clouded, or cloud itself is reality?
Yeah, it's a really, really stimulating point. I mean, there are many ways one can take it. I think the reflection of reality has always been a complicated issue, because what one could think about the argument that goes back a long way, nearly 100 years now, between what deals better with reality. Is it the the panoramic novel of the 19th century model, as in Walter Scott and Balzac and so on, or is it the fragmented, nightmarish, exaggerated sense of reality as embodied in Kafka and in modernist writers of Virginia Woolf and so on? Which one of those has more access to what feels like the motive forces of reality? And I suppose we're still debating that, aren't we? I still think there is this sense in which the worlds that we live in are more fantastical, more fictional than literature can present. There was a point in the 90s, was it I can't remember, I think it was Douglas Kellner, the American critic, who said this, that or no, it relates to the Mike Davis history of LA, and I think William Gibson said this, that what Mike Davis was writing about, the urban infrastructure of LA and the automatic security weapons and helicopters, this vision was more cyberpunk than Gibson's own fictionalized versions of it. So in a sense, reality outbids the fiction and becomes more extreme. And I think we're still, I think now we're really wrestling with that, because this world within which we live does feel unreal. And certainly for me, for the first few months of this pandemic, as it hit the United Kingdom in spring of last year, it didn't seem real. I felt I was living through a fiction. So I think both the extended nature of technology now, through what cloud computing and the digital has made possible, and the biomedical conditions of pandemic, and then everything that came around Trump, maybe around Modi, I don't know so much about that, what's been happening in Europe as well. Suddenly politics became this, felt sort of over dramatic. I don't want to say fiction, because that implies it has no implications, but just unbelievable in the sense that we say suspension of belief in relation to fictional forms. So I think the questions are really interesting one. I think there is a cloudedness at the heart of reality. There's something inaccessible to us that maybe there are fictional forms that can help us to peek into that. But I also think there's a huge thirst for what we think of as reality now. Reality-based drama, all of that stuff. The documentary form, I think, has come back quite forcefully. But sorry, that was a bit of a long answer, but it's a stimulating question. Thank you.
Thank you. Maybe a related inquiry from Vishal Ranjan. He's saying cloud as a metaphor, as you say, helps understand the contemporary digital technological changes. Hold on. Sorry. Sorry, my device. Okay. Yeah. To extend this metaphor, there is also a cloudiness of public opinion, like fake news, and also a fogginess when thought of the effects of the digital might generate, which seems to carry an element of the unpredictable as it becomes increasingly complex. And although there is a control society at work, one also wonders of how easy it might be to lose control on some levels, even by the surveillance capitalists. What are your thoughts on the potential dangers of the unknowns the digital technology can generate and the organic, uncontrolled manners in which it propagates? I hope it's again long, but yes.
Yeah, no, it's a really, really good point, and I like that expression, and I think it echoes the other question in the sense that there's something cloudy, there's something indefinite with, as you say, the sort of the fake news, the kind of excess in a way of opinions and information that in the end doesn't lead to clarity, but just to more confusion. So there is that cloudiness, that fogginess that makes it difficult to know what's actual, what's honest, and what to do. I mean, it's quite negatively presented here that in a sense there can be efforts towards a control society, but also again and again that doesn't work, or control it, because there are different agents, there are different parties, I suppose, that have different interests in this, and partly there's just the fact that things glitch, that technology constantly glitches, and sometimes that's helpful, you know, if all your student debt, you know, if your student debt data was suddenly wiped off a server because it melted down, you know, that could be useful, or it could be used in malevolent and negative ways, you know. So I think all of this is subject to all sorts of arguments and the interests of different players and contradictory interests. Yeah, I don't think that there's a perfect system of control, certainly of ones in the United Kingdom. You know, you can see the ways in which there's a kind of government through incompetence, which may or may not be deliberate, but you know, it's these things constantly fail and then have to be reinvented or augmented, and there is no perfect capturing of that. I suppose I wonder if in other parts of the world whether there are stronger, stricter regimes of control which do work better. But I mean, the dangers they're clear, aren't they? I mean, they're not just loss of individual liberty or feeling that all one is a consumer or subject to surveillance, I think the bigger danger is the loss of the social plane. You know, we've had this year of so-called social distancing now, which, as others have said, really should be physical distancing, but it was named social distancing because it's precisely the realm of the social and the which puts the accent on solidarity and collectivity, which is the one that's under attack, which is why when I talk about the new Google headquarters in this part of London that presents itself as a public area, but in fact it's a private area with its own set of laws and its own security guards, you know, that it's the loss of the social that I think is the big danger, the loss of each other.
All right, thank you. And also I must add that our last talk.
No, Thomas, Chetan.
Yeah, before that, I'm just announcing that our fourth talk and the last talk is on post-truth, humanities and research in the time of post-truth. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I know that Chetan wants to ask a question, but
Yes, yes.
before that, let me read one more question from here.
Oh, sure. After that, Chetan can unmute and ask you.
Yeah, so ma'am, clouds can also take up sinister forms like tornadoes and cloudbursts and can cause a lot of destruction. Can cloud computing and the digital world have a negative effect on humans? How do we think about all that? And can we think it's a destructive power as a ghost that haunts us?
Yeah, I definitely think, because I think we're giving something of ourselves all the time to somewhere that we don't really know. We have a fantasy of what that place is and that it exists for us, but it doesn't. I mean, I think there's a really interesting shift in social relations in that the cloud has produced this sense of renting within the world. So it's almost like post-bourgeois ownership. Now everybody rents a space to put their data, their photographs, their life, you know, and it's on the conditions of others, and that is an honor. It's not a right, is it? It's an honor that can be revoked at any point. So, you know, I think that's partially a danger in that it's a kind of alienation that you don't feel as an alienation until the point at which it fails. On the other hand, you know, I suppose there are immense possibilities opened up. I mean, not least that I can speak to you in India is an amazing thing as well. So, you know, always these things are subject to the push and pull of negatives and positives. But in the end, I mean, it comes down to situations of ownership, doesn't it? And yeah, so social relations. And also not to forget the immense environmental cost of this. For example, the whole cryptocurrency thing, and people talk about the energy taken to mine cryptocurrencies, which is now talked about much more, how, you know, how environmentally unfriendly Bitcoin and so on are. And we might decide socially that's an energy cost we're prepared to pay, or we might wonder if there's a different way of doing things.
All right, thank you. Now, Chetan, can you be brief? Please ask your questions so we can accommodate more questions. Yeah.
Hi, ma'am. Thanks for a really nice talk. Am I audible?
Yeah, you are.
And your concept of the cloud actually reminded me of Lacan's concept of the real. You know, the necessary default in some senses that shapes reality. It may resonate with, you know, what you said about cloud being at the heart of reality, or cloud maybe emerging from necessary entanglement with reality. And somehow, when we think about digital, it's my sort of sense that, you know, we're talking about a new economy of digital as we're approaching in today's time and today's age, even when we talk about, and I think in this new economy of the digital, the category human is substantially becoming unnecessary to the necessities of constructing our reality in some senses. And that is how the pleasures and the question of pleasure seeking behavior and so on comes to our and in this world where this category is getting reduced to its bare minimum, what role can knowledge or theory play in sort of elongating these circuits, especially in a context where the problem of speed in digital, the speed becomes such that the human body itself is not needed in the way it was needed before. So we are not needed to interpret things in the same manner. Then what role can category human, as in humanities, and maybe theory, knowledge can play in constructing the world that's coming up now, or the world will be constructed outside our bodies itself, because our bodies are completely incapable of managing the information and the data that are coming up in that sense.
Yeah, that's a really fascinating point. And I think I want to think more about that, the Lacanian sense there, because I think that is rather illuminating the necessary default that shapes reality, or the cloud at the heart of reality, or in a sense a kind of fantastical relation that I suppose is a kind of ideological construct, in a sense, that shapes the real that we think we relate to or move through. Yeah, because one of the strong emphases within theoretical thinking has maybe not so much gone for the post-human, but for the sense in which the human is just another node in this network of hubs, servers, people, animals, things, people, that this internet of things, which is just a type of technological infrastructure, becomes a name for a world in which we are repositioned as just another thing among many, and perhaps a different thing depending which part of the network we are plugged into at any one time. And that really does raise the question of, on the one hand, I think you were saying, what would it mean to do knowledge work within that, or what are we coming to know, and can we come to know in the ways that we previously assumed knowledge might perhaps set us free, or produce resistance even. Is that still the role for knowledge? And also, where is pleasure, if we've traditionally interpreted pleasure as something generated by, passing through, demanded as desire through the body? What happens if effectively we've become thingly? We are reified, where so then maybe simply to insist on desire and pleasure becomes, as it always has been, a radical or extraordinary act. But I think these are questions. We're going through this in real time, and things are moving so quickly in terms of how we're positioned. I'm not even sure that those of us who are employed to think about these things are able to respond quickly enough to the shifting situation. But yeah, it's a really well taken point. Thank you.
Yeah, let me read one more comment that is in the chat box from Shatarupa Mishra. Can I read it, Professor Leslie? Can you hear me? Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can.
Yeah. All right. So she's asking. I think she tries to connect colonialism with cloud. She's saying, does it complicate the concept of colonialism? Maybe she's referring to the colonization of the digital. I mean, the digital is colonizing us. Does it complicate the idea of colonialism? You
Right.
want to comment on that? Or?
The notion of the cloud.
Yeah.
And really interesting. I mean, I'm fascinated by the way that the painter John Constable in 1821 stands on Hampstead Heath and looks at the clouds and says, you know, we're all under the same sky. These clouds are everywhere. And there's such a democratic aspiration there, but the reality is the reality of colonial intervention on the part of people in Britain across the world, including India. And so, you know, and it's as banal as saying Queen Victoria is Queen of the world or something. So what's the gap between the possibility of those clouds being for everyone a universal experience and the fact of Queen Victoria being, say, Empress of India? Are these two different imaginations or the same thing? And what would be the equivalent now, you know, to say Jeff Bezos, you know, provides goods for the whole world or something? You know, does that mean we all have equal access to this cloud-based mode of shopping? Or, you know, are there power relations there, and are they still moving along the same geographical lines as colonialism did? Or is there a recalibration? Or, you know, have we all in some sense become a colony of the cloud? I mean, it would be very interesting to think in those ways. But certainly in an old scale frame, I would imagine one can still talk about the cultural imperialism that went along with colonization, the dominant language of the web being English, you know, all of those issues, that the asymmetry of the globe are written into the cloud and all of its functions still.
Thank
you know this.
Before that, I think there is Prakshit Singh. Give me a second, and she wants her question to be asked. She says, all the humans have their own clouds, the clouds in their minds and in their life. And she's asking all, and in addition to the giant clouds by the cyber world, cloud computing, all these lead humanity towards the next degree of dystopia. Does it lead to a dystopia? That's what she's asking.
Yeah, well, that's the question. In a sense, it depends on how we use it, doesn't it? And how much we give over to it. And I mean, maybe these thoughts seem particularly negative because many of us have spent the last year. You know, I haven't been to my office for 6 months. You know, I've just been at this seat with this computer, and I haven't seen my colleagues. And you know, it does feel like something from, you know, a science fiction dystopia, doesn't it? Or you know, so I do think the capacity to imagine or to understand ourselves as inhabiting a dystopia has grown from the particularity of what I think much of the world has been through. But it's also been a lesson in thinking about what could be. I remember in the very early days of the pandemic, there was a lot of utopian thinking about how we couldn't go back to how things were, and all sorts of dreams and beautiful things emerged. Certainly here in the United Kingdom, it feels like the rush is to go back to exactly how we were before, and more of it. And that, in a sense, is the real dystopia. And it may not be to do with the cloud and all of that. It may be to do with bigger things about work and education and people's social status and, you know, all those things. But I think, yeah, definitely we have new material to conceive dystopia, and partly we've been living through it.
Yeah, thank you. Again, there are some scholars in the audience who work in similar fields. So, Vinod, you want to make a comment, and then I think Priyanka and I are. You can also intervene if you would like, because you also work and you have worked in this field. So, Vinod, do you want to make a comment? Yes. You have to unmute. But you have to unmute yourself. Yeah. Yeah, still you are muted. No, I think.
Vinod, Dr. Vinod,
Yeah.
please unmute yourself.
Maybe Tojo, can you help?
Okay. Hello. Hello.
Yes.
Yeah. Thank you for the opportunity. Let me start by saying what a beautiful presentation that was. It was a very poetic account of the cloud. So, it is maybe after the romantics who romance the cloud. I thought in our time, in very difficult times, there is somebody who has managed to speak about the cloud. I would like to see how this poetic account of the cloud, with all its dystopian possibilities so well articulated, that itself is the performance of this talk, and that's how I would like to see it. It is poetry indeed, but it is poetry trying to make sense of a new reality that is staring us in the face. And I thought it's a very difficult kind of making, in the sense that poetry is trying to make the world in terms of new phraseology, in terms of new images. And I thought this was one poetic attempt to capture with as much inventiveness, as much folds of language, with as much clarity, the kind of the slippery and elusive character of the cloud. Now, I thought that also to me represents this tension between the humanities and the sciences. It's one of the oldest relations that we can think of. And every time there has been a breakthrough in the sciences, a new idea dawning in the sciences, we have seen how very quickly the poet, the writer, the philosopher has latched on to that and turned it into an image, turned it into an idea, and then also brought it into the text. But what I also see in this new interaction with science, where I mean our foray into the cloud, or cloud admitting us into its frame, or that space, I thought it is now a different reality. It is not the language. We are struggling to find the language. There are no images as they existed earlier, because those images are all generated synthetically. So now it is not that we can make images from our understanding of science. It is like science, going ahead of us, ahead of even thinking, and then generating on its own something even like autonomous machines, behaving with a mind of their own. So more than a ghost in the machine, it is like the machine itself behaving like a ghost with an unpredictable mind of its own. So it's like I thought under those circumstances, the present lecture is like a fantastic attempt to see how well we can communicate when that which we are talking about is always a little beyond our reach. Maybe for Keats, the Grecian urn was always there, and for the lover, you could always fix it in the frame of the urn. But then this is a different ball game as such. There are no boundaries that we can define. And so in case there is something that we are referring to, it would not even be there. So I thought when I see it in that light, this was a very beautiful poetic performance, a lot of courageous innovation happening there, a lot of tying up when there is this continuous tendency to break all, you know, seams, you know, burst at the seams and go away. So it's so beautiful, so beautiful. I enjoyed this presentation. Thank you.
Well, thank you so much. That's just perfect response, and I think that's really interesting. I want to think about that idea about what, you know, when you're grasping and you're trying to bend language, like you tried to understand something of the scientific and technological state, but you tried to communicate that into a poetic form. And I think you're right, but it's you're operating at the boundaries of sense, because also for the scientists, they're operating at the boundaries of sense. And I think for me, those images that look like people but are just machines' dreams of people, you know, emblematize that. You think it's there, it's concrete, but this is something that only a machine has produced, you know, that it's from its imagination, and we can't really comprehend what that means and what that means for poetry, or for our thinking. So thank you for your comment. That's really lovely.
Yeah, thank you. Priya, is Priya there? Would you like to make a response? Because she works in the area of post-human digital humanism. Is Priya there? Um, oh, she's not there. Okay, so may I ask you, like, why you probably avoid terms like post-human or digital human or precarity and all that? Is that conscious, or would you like to comment on that? Or...
Yeah, I suppose it's not. I guess because I work in a way that seems so multidisciplinary or something, I worry about being caught within a particular frame, but then I have one overarching frame, which is my sense of a Marxist historical materialist approach, but one that's very infused with Walter Benjamin and Adorno mainly. And so I kind of want to stay within their vocabulary. I think that's why I avoid these other terms. Although, you know, I know there are points at which, you know, it could become, you know, it could move towards Jane Bennett style vibrant matter, or ideas that have come up through Bruno Latour, or you know, or sometimes there are Deleuzian aspects. So, you know, it could become those things. But I guess I want to remain faithful to my expanded notion of a Marxist and Frankfurt School critical theory tradition.
Thank you. Thank you. And Does anyone want to make a comment more? We have probably a few minutes. So, Biju, would you like to make a comment? I don't think Priya is there. So, does anyone in the audience have a comment? Maybe last chance to make a comment or give a response. Well, I think like you, the audience, they are also tired.
Yeah.
Sure, you must be really tired. You worked really hard, So,
Thomas, just 2 or 3 messages. Could you
yeah,
please?
please. Yeah, let me read if I can, because I'm managing a small device.
So,
So,
it's not actually questions. Yeah.
yeah, there are no questions. But yeah, there is one query about, do you relate this to what Derrida called a monstrosity that is coming? Derrida refers to the future. Yeah, maybe your comments now.
Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, monstrosity, and I don't know the specifics of Derrida's use of that. It's been a long time since I saw Derrida, but I think that if that means, monstrous in the sense of that which shows itself in a way, then I think the struggle here is to understand precisely what is showing itself in not showing itself. So it's the moving target, it's the self-modifying shape of the future that's here and always changing, trying to grasp it. I think that, yeah, that the task is to understand the monstrosity, and I'm not without hope, because we are human, and mostly we do want good things. So, we're the ones who have to find the hope, have to make it, have to shape things as we want them to be.
Okay, now I think it's almost close to 2 hours. So as I said, you did a wonderful job, and thank you so much. So I would invite Dr. Biju, who is a convener and also the director of C-Praxis, to formally, thank Professor Leslie. Over to Biju.
Thank you, Thomas. Professor Esther Leslie, it was an amazing experience. You have almost, brought in almost all major areas of concern as part of this webinar into this your talk. We are so privileged to extend your deep sense of gratitude to you. Thank you for coming to us. Definitely, we'll have another session with you on topics connected to that. Thank you, Leslie, Professor Leslie, for your kind response. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Thank you. So thank you again for accepting the invitation. So you're so generous, and happy to hear that this is your first experience
Yeah.
in our part of the world. So,
and I really hope to be there in person at some point.
Sure. Yeah. Yeah. At least for that reason, this pandemic should subside. Yes. There should be a reason.
Yes, definitely.
Yeah. Thank you so much again. I'll be in touch.
Thank you. Thank you so much. I'll go now.
Yes.
Bye,
Thank
everyone.
you.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you all the participants also. We will meet